Historically, productivity as we know it today was used during the Industrial Revolution. It was a system that measured performance based on consistent output. You clocked into your shift and were responsible for creating X number of widgets on the assembly line. At the end of the day, it was pretty easy to see who worked hard and who hadn't. When we shift a knowledge economy, people suddenly had tasks that were much more abstract, things like writing, problem solving, or strategizing, tasks that weren't easy to measure. Companies struggled to figure out how to tell who was working and who wasn't, so they just adopted the old systems as best as they could, leading to things like the dreaded timesheet, where everyone is under pressure to justify how they spend every second of their day. Productivity has wrapped itself up in our self-worth so that it's almost impossible for us to allow ourselves to stop working. The average US employee only takes half of their allocated paid vacation leave, further proving that even if we have the option to take a break, we don't. Your creativity, it has its own rhythms. Our energy fluctuates daily, weekly, even seasonally. I know that I'm always more energetic at the beginning of the week than at the end, so I front load my work week to account for that fact. As a proud night owl, I free up my afternoons and evenings for creative work, and I know I'll get more writing done in the cozy winter months than during the summer.
I'm trying to understand romantic love, I decided I would read poetry from all over the world. And I just want to give you one very short poem from 8th century China, because it's an almost perfect example of a man who is focused totally on a particular woman. It's a little bit like when you are madly in love with somebody and you walk into a parking lot, their car is different from every other car in the parking lot. Their wine glass at dinner is different from every other wine glass at the dinner party. And in this case, a man got hooked on a bamboo sleeping mat. I began to realize that romantic love is not an emotion. In fact, I had always thought it was a series of emotions from very high to very low, but actually it's a drive. It comes from the motor of the mind, the wanting part of the mind, the craving part of the mind, the kind of part of the mind when you're reaching for that piece of chocolate, when you want to win that promotion at work, the motor of the brain. It's a drive.
This was only a few years after the supposed flying saucer crash at Roswell, New Mexico. And even though that turned out to be nothing at all, merely a downed weather balloon piloted by small hairless men with slits for mouths, still America had gone saucer mad, even famous scientists who were eating lunch. Fermi's reasoning, if I may paraphrase badly, is that the universe is so vast that it stands to reason there should be other intelligent life out there, and the universe is so old that unless we were the very first civilization ever to evolve, we should have some evidence of their existence by now. And yet, to the best of our knowledge, we are alone.
The fund was deposited as a family leisure in a safe, reliable security company in Dakar, Senegal, where I was only given temporary asylum. I do not wish to invest the money in Senegal due to unfavorable economic climate and so close to my country. The only assistance I need from you, which I know you would do for me, are the following. 1, be a silent partner and receive the funds in your account in trust. 2, provide a bank account under your control to which the funds will be remitted. 3, receive the funds into your account in trust. Take out your commission and leave the rest of the money until I arrive after the transfer is complete.
Now, sometimes neuroscientists need to identify individual molecular components of neurons, molecules, rather than the entire cell. And there are several ways of doing this, but one of the most popular ones involves using antibodies. And you're familiar, of course, with antibodies as the henchmen of the immune system. But it turns out that they're so useful to the immune system because they can recognize specific molecules, like, for example, the code protein of a virus that's invading the body. And researchers have used this fact in order to recognize specific molecules inside of the brain, recognize specific substructures of the cell, and identify them individually.
Spiders are truly global citizens. You can find spiders in nearly every terrestrial habitat. This red dot marks the Great Basin of North America, and I'm involved with an alpine biodiversity project there with some collaborators. Here's one of our field sites, and just to give you a sense of perspective, this little blue smudge here, that's one of my collaborators. This is a rugged and barren landscape, yet there are quite a few spiders here. Turning rocks over revealed this crab spider grappling with a beetle.
We design objects and products and structures and tools across scales, from the large scale, like this robotic arm with an 80-foot diameter reach with a vehicular base that will one day soon print entire buildings, to nanoscale graphics made entirely of genetically engineered microorganisms that glow in the dark. Here we've reimagined the mashrabiyah, an archetype of ancient Arabic architecture, and created a screen where every aperture is uniquely sized to shape the form of light and heat moving through it.
In 1998, my friends and I won a national art competition. The prize was a week in Disneyland Paris with hundreds of other children from across the world as delegates to UNESCO's International Children's Summit. Now, this was no ordinary trip to Disneyland. Between running riot in the park and making friends, we workshopped the future of this planet. How could we overcome the problems of pollution and their threats to human and environmental health? How could we guarantee universal human rights of equality, justice, and dignity?
The Cambridge team, she explained, had spent their summer engineering the bacteria E. coli to be able to sense different things in their environment and produce a rainbow of different colors in response. Arsenic in your drinking water? This strain would turn green. She and her collaborator, the designer James King, worked with the students and imagined different possible scenarios of how you might use these bacteria. What if, they asked, you could use them as a living probiotic drink and health monitor all in one? You could drink the bacteria and it would live in your gut, sensing what's going on, and then in response to something, it would be able to produce a colored output. That day 10 years ago started me on a path that gets me to where I am now. Today, I'm the creative director at a synthetic biology company called Ginkgo Bioworks. Creative director is a weird title for a biotech company where people try to program life the way that we program computers. But that day when I met Daisy, I learned something about engineering. I learned that engineering isn't really just about equations and steel and circuits. It's actually about people. It's something that people do and impacts us.
We as humans place constant pressure on our natural world. And in response, nature fights back to balance the scales. Nature has been adapting and reacting to the presence of human developments, just like we've been adapting and reacting to nature. And nature is telling us we are on an unsustainable path. It is time to course correct. That does not mean abandoning technology, but it means harnessing the power of biology itself to reconcile the creature comfort of human civilization with our natural world. The answer is synthetic biology. Now, some of you may be thinking, synthetic biology? That sounds like an oxymoron at best and dangerous at worst. How can something biological, which is based on nature, also be synthetic, which implies not natural at all? Well, synthetic biology is the engineering of nature to benefit society.
You might be interested to know that the CRISPR technology came about through a basic research project that was aimed at discovering how bacteria fight viral infections. Bacteria have to deal with viruses in their environment, and we can think about a viral infection like a ticking time bomb. A bacterium has only a few minutes to defuse the bomb before it gets destroyed. So many bacteria have in their cells an adaptive immune system called CRISPR that allows them to detect viral DNA and destroy it. the opportunity to do this kind of genome editing also raises various ethical issues that we have to consider, because this technology can be employed not only in adult cells, but also in the embryos of organisms, including our own species. And so together with my colleagues, I've called for a global conversation about the technology that I co-invented so that we can consider all of the ethical and societal implications of a technology like this.
Some of you may have read about the FDA's consideration right now of genetically engineered salmon. The salmon on top is a genetically engineered Chinook salmon using a gene from the salmon and from one other fish that we eat to make it grow much faster using a lot less feed. And right now the FDA is trying to make a final decision on whether pretty soon you could be eating this fish. It'll be sold in the stores. And before you get too worried about it, here in the United States, the majority of food you buy in the supermarket already has genetically modified components to it. So even as we worry about it, we have allowed it to go on in this country, much different in Europe, without any regulation and even without any identification on the package.
There are many people who think that the animal world is hardwired and that there's something very, very special about man. Maybe it's his ability to have causal thought. Maybe it's something special in his brain that allows him to have language. Maybe it's something special in his brain that allows him to make tools or to have mathematics. Well, I don't know. There were Tasmanians who were discovered around the 1600s, and they had no fire. They had no stone tools. To our knowledge, they had no music. So when you compare them to the bonobo, the bonobo was a little hairier. He doesn't stand quite as upright, but there are a lot of similarities. And I think that as we look at culture, we kind of come to understand how we got to where we are. And I don't really think it's in our biology. I think we've attributed it to our biology, but I don't really think it's there.
To understand what was happening to my community, I had to talk to other communities around the globe. I started in South Louisiana with the United Homa Nation. I talked to youth advocates in Shishmaref, Alaska. I talked to fisherwomen in coastal Vietnam, justice fighters in Fiji, new generations of leaders in the ancient cultures of the Torres Straits. Communities that had been here for thousands of years were suffering the same fate, and we were all contemplating how we would survive the next 50.